Honored guests, Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I have a picture at home above my desk. It was done some 120 years ago by a French illustrator who imagined how the school would look like in the year 2000. And he imagined a teacher feeding books into some kind of a machine and knowledge being transferred via wires to some kind of learning helmets on heads of students. So this illustrator actually didn't foresee Wi-Fi networks. He imagined learning helmets instead of screens, but actually this forecast seems remarkably familiar when I enter schools nowadays. And today we are at a similar position that this illustrator was 120 years ago. We are talking about the school of today and imaging the school of tomorrow. And in these past 2 days, many important thoughts, ideas, examples of good practice were shown and shared across this conference. They were shared by teachers, educators, students, researchers, practitioners, policymakers. We heard about digital tools, about artificial intelligence, and about the needs of children to be hugged. We discussed critical thinking skills, developing autonomous students, supporting and empowering teachers, the importance of well-being. We heard about compassion, about inclusion. When we think about the school of tomorrow, indeed, there are many challenges ahead. Some are concerned with questions regarding digitalization and artificial intelligence. Some with other important challenges that educational systems, schools, and teachers need to address. And this conference actually showed again that we have so much to learn from each other. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to hear through this panel experiences and examples of good practice. And I believe we are all eager to hear how European Commission and different European countries are tackling these challenges and how they see priorities with regard to the future challenges. I welcome you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musek Lešnik, and you will, as I said, provide a summary of our discussion. But we start with you, of course, Madam Commissioner, Madam Gabriel. We would like to focus on future in our 1 hour discussion, and please, can you focus on approaches to accelerate the development of digital education in Europe, of course, while keeping in mind the most important things? Especially around well-being, not only of children and young people who are being educated, but also the educators. So, Madam Gabriel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Allow me just at the beginning to take a little bit of time to thank Minister Kustec for inviting me to join this last session of the Slovenian Presidency Conference on Digital Education. I'm very glad to be part of this extraordinary panel with a lot of extraordinary participants. And I would like to congratulate you, dear Simona, on choosing such an important topic for today's discussion. Well, in the last almost 2 years, we all have experienced a very important change in the way we use digital technologies in teaching and learning processes. This change was brought about by the pandemic and significantly accelerated digitalization of education and training systems in Europe. However, the pandemic only speeded up the pace of change. It did not create the reason for our action. The reason is the digital transformation and the need to prepare our citizens, including young people, to live and thrive in a digital society and economy. And this change is something we need to embrace along with the enormous opportunities it brings and find the best way to address the challenges that exist. This is important as harnessing the potential of digital technologies can bring benefits to the whole society. And these technologies, including emerging ones, such as artificial intelligence and learning analytics, are game changers. They can enable new forms of work, active citizenship, help maintain social relationships, as well as new, more flexible and personalized forms of teaching and learning. And with this in mind, as European Commission, we have developed concrete and ambitious actions in the Digital Education Action Plan. Let me give you just a few examples. First, we promote the development of a high-performing digital education ecosystem. The relevant actions aim to support education and training systems in exploiting the potential of digital technologies in a strategic way. Second, we emphasize the importance of ensuring that institutions and learners keep full control over the process. This means approaching existing and emerging technologies with full awareness of the issues at stake, namely cybersecurity risks and risks to the physical and mental well-being of individuals. Our common objective should be to make digital technologies more responsible, human-centric, and better suited to the needs of society. And third, something that is really important, we are working actually on the development of ethical guidelines on artificial intelligence and data usage in teaching and learning for educators. It's absolutely important with these guidelines that I wish to be very pragmatic, to support our teachers in their efforts to use digital technology for innovative teaching and learning, while always taking into account the interests of learners. And I think that it will be really important that we raise awareness, ensure a real follow-up of these guidelines, and that's why I count on every one of us. So in one sentence, well-being and digital education should complement each other, but we need to be aware of the challenges and we need to propose solutions that are human-centered.
Thank you very much, Madam Gabriel. For this opening, I pass now to Minister Kustec. We will hear some examples of good practices in the near future, which means from most of our panelists. Well, one very important aspect of well-being is also systematic school counseling work. But what can you tell us about this regarding Slovenia? So where are we when it comes to the introduction of this systemic integration of school counseling as an integral part of each school? You get a special treatment of the microphone. Not only it will be switched on, but also cleaned. COVID-19 measures at its best.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say a warm welcome again to Madam Commissioner, dear Mariya. We've already met each other virtually in the morning in the event that is very close to the topic that we are going to debate as well during this panel in the afternoon. Also, my dear colleagues, ministers, with the colleagues, and especially dear participants here in the meeting room and via distance communication. Dear practitioners, dear teachers, and dear students, dear professors. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for everything that you inputted into the debate yesterday and today. It is the debate that already now delivers precious feedbacks, information, and commitments that we need to accept. And I know that we've already done this for our future. So if the question is where we are moving on tomorrow, we are moving on exactly from the point of the stage of today. And today means that we all are aware that the digital transformation is here and is a fact, also in educational system. But we need to be very, very careful, and we need to take a lot of our own responsibilities for taking only those positive elements that are going to enable our educational system and knowledge of the future even better than it is today. And that we need to be aware of all the negative elements, unfortunately, and threats that can also bring this element of digitalization, or concretely artificial intelligence, especially when we are using it directly for the purposes of the human beings. And I think that you've already emphasized and addressed both sides of the coin yesterday and today. And I would really like us to debate about this for the future. Because it is a fact, and we do all agree, that if we want to modernize our educational system, our vision of knowledge of the future, the fact that not only individual member states, but the whole European Union is based on the values of knowledge and the civilization of knowledge, and in this regard education, that we need to prepare all together the system that is going to be a step forward in the quality of knowledge and procedures, processes, educational systems and tools that, that can be applied for this aim. And yes, definitely going back to the essential question, for sure, this psychological element is very, very important here as well, because it helps us understand where those borders are. It helps us understand to which border individuals and societies are able to come to get the best out of it for each other. And yes, when we are speaking about the educational system, for sure, I would say the experts from the counselor side of the educational system are important. And we in our country are aware of this all the time, actually. The counselors are the essential elements, I would say, one of the pillars of our educational system all the time. And in these COVID times, we even strengthen their role. But we need to be aware that only relying on their support is not going to be enough. We need to identify together what kind of effects this digitalization brings to not only our people, that means our students and the teachers, but also for the whole society, and what are those positive elements inside educational system that we need to address and that we need to support for the future. And if we would like to do this really, I would say, responsible, then we need to do and address this together. And here I don't mean only the addressment at the level of the different scientific groups and directly involved stakeholders in the educational system, but much wider. That means also policymakers, but not only policymakers at the national level for each individual member state or country, but as we are here inside the European Union family, that we are doing this together, also with the assistance, with the collaboration with European Union institutions. And here I need to especially emphasize the role of European Commission in this regard, which is here, which is visible, and which is very important already now for tackling and addressing these elements and challenges of digitalization in the field of education, as you addressed with your question. But it is not the only one. And this is something that I would really like to emphasize also in the light of our future debate in this panel, so that we need to be aware of the all constitutive elements of digital transformation that needs to be identified when we speak about educational systems for the future of member states, and also the concept of European Union educational system in the coming years and decades.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Now we'll hear probably some very good examples from different European countries, and we start with Portugal. Mr. Costa, you won't believe I originally come from the world of sports, and I spent quite a lot of time discussing the Portuguese educational system with a very famous football player, a Slovenian football player who played for a long time in Portugal, for both Porto and also Benfica. So he's not a problematic person for either side. So because he had his children in the Portuguese education system, and he was overwhelmed with the progress made in Portugal. Also, if we take a look into the history before the mid-70s, when actually the revolution occurred. So Portugal is in many ways a role model for a lot of European and also globally for a lot of states. And as I see, you would like to start our, let's say, inspirational part of the debate by presenting the concept of happy school. Mm-hmm. So you even have happy schools now in Portugal.
Well, we hope so, at least. We hope so. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be part of this conference, and for the opportunity to share and to discuss. I'm more capable of talking about education than about soccer, because I'm a soccer agnostic in terms of the teams here in Portugal. But I know that it's a very big thing all over Europe, so also here. And let me, on Minister Kustec and the Commissioner Mariya, Gabriel, to greet everyone and say that it's a great pleasure to be here sharing our experience. Indeed, we have a fast progressing system. We were at a very bad stage in the 70s, after 50 years, almost 50 years of dictatorship, and the biggest burden of those years is a very low-skilled population with very high levels of early school dropout and grade repetition, and this has been corrected slowly. And we moved, for instance, just to give you an example, we had 40 years ago, more than 1/4% of our population could not read and write, and now we almost eradicated illiteracy. We had only 1% of our population attending higher education. Now we have 40% of our youngsters in higher education, and there are several indicators along these lines. And indeed, happiness is one of the features that we'd like to embrace here. Not in establishing these false dichotomies between a knowledge-based curriculum versus a skill-based curriculum, but really aware that you don't have knowledge if you're not skilled. The skills do not build on emptiness, they are built on knowledge, and that well-being in general is a condition, not only a condition to be able to learn, but also a goal of being in school. We educate people so that they thrive, and that they thrive in a happiness that is based on their capacity for an active citizenship and belonging in society. And in this sense, this initiative that we have now in Portugal, this think tank for happy schools, is one of many opportunities that we have for promoting reflection about whole school approaches to inclusion, to citizenship, to the curriculum, and to base all our education policy on principles of flexibility and adaptability, so that the school is adequate to the context and we are not imposing rigid and fixed models on students irrespectively of their background or their abilities. And in a sense, the pandemic, when we think of this almost 50 years of democratic schooling in Portugal, I said many times that the pandemic acted as a microscope on the education system. I think in education systems overall, but also in our education system. And things that were already visible for many, that were already relevant for many, became gigantic and became urgent and became obvious even to those people who never thought of education with great detail. So the emergency of digitalization, we already knew that we had to take steps in the digital transition when we think about education. But all of a sudden, we had to change in 3 or 4 days from an almost 100% face-to-face system to a 100% remote system. And with the impact this had, I remember Commissioner Mariya Gabriel telling us right after the beginning of the first lockout, this is the biggest impact on education since World War II. I've been quoting you all over the place because it's a portrait of what we were experiencing that really made me, you know, I was a bit shivering when you said that and said, wow, this is really happening. This is really big, and we don't know how to do this. And this is one of the great lessons from the pandemic, is this lesson of humility. No one knew how to cope with this, and we needed to network. We needed everyone. We needed to share between countries. We needed to involve many stakeholders. We needed to reflect. The other aspect of the system that was put under this lens, this microscope, was the urgency of flexibility in the curriculum. We could not have fixed solutions. We needed to adapt. We needed to live to the circumstances. We needed flexibility in assessment. We were discussing this in Portugal before, and it became very obvious that if we were not sure how students were learning, we could not be sure how students were going to be assessed because we were not fully aware of what they were learning. But the biggest issue, which was already the biggest issue for many education systems, was the issue of equity. All of a sudden, the social functions of the school became evident and they became impaired. To provide food for students who only have their hot meal in school, to provide safety, the protection in what regards negligence, abuses, prevention of dropout. The dependency on families with all these means became enormous, and this was a source for the increase of inequalities among students. Those who have parents who could follow up the studies, who could take kids out of bed to connect to school, were more able to provide education to their children. And one third aspect that became very evident was the role of social and emotional skills. We could not smile because we had masks. We could not touch. We could not see our faces. We could not play in the playground. And this has a very heavy burden on how we develop. It has an impact on us adults, and it has a much bigger impact on children when playing is part of growth, playing is part of development. And also, we became aware of some emerging literacies that many of us we were already discussing, and they become very, very relevant. The role of education for citizenship, the fact that some fundamental rights appear to be suspended because we were in emergency states, health literacy, media literacy. We were surrounded, kids were surrounded by fake news about vaccines, about masks, about hidden hidden secrets about the pandemic. And because they were away from school, they became more vulnerable for this. During the pandemic, we worked a lot on the spirit of networking, creating networks of schools to provide assistance to the least privileged students, but also meeting regularly with schools so that we would be able to help each other. During the second lockout, there was a decision not to close schools to a set of students, those who needed therapies, those who could not connect, those who were at risk for negligence. And of course, we boosted a lot in terms of digital support. We started buying equipment and connectivity kits. This was very difficult. This was very much constrained by all sorts of obstacles, lack of supply, problems with transports. We all experienced that, but also the support to schools. In 2 days, we created a support site to schools with resources, with training for the teachers, building capacity in digital skills, guidelines for platforms, remote teaching, didactics, training, cybersecurity, open access with the collaboration of our publishing houses, open access to digital resources. We created TV contents in Open TV for all school years, also available via platforms to be used also, not synchronous matters. And we maintained, this was very important, we maintained all complementary programs to the curriculum. Our literacy program, our national arts program, our cinema program, so that the arts were a tool to promote well-being to the students. Now, the biggest concern was for us really well-being. There are some issues that we can recover in 2-3 years in terms of some specific areas of content, but the burden on the emotional skills, on some foundational literacies is the biggest concern. So we allocated technicians for locally developed plans for social, community, and personal development, and we reinforced tutorials. And very importantly, we created these partnerships with Happy Schools, with the Ubuntu methodologies. And for these years, we are continuing these supporting measures, creating lots of regular assessment on student performance and well-being with the definition of new indicators and new trends, and with a great focus on foundational literacies, but with the backup of other areas, for us, for instance, experimental sciences. The baseline was to trust schools, to provide schools great autonomy in terms of organizational freedom for a better adequacy to context. And of course, we are continuing the digital action plan in terms of infrastructure, teacher capacity, digital resources, and digital literacy for the students. But with one big lesson that I think we learned from this pandemic: the digital is a tool, not a goal. All the digital world cannot be set as a goal. So when we have this title of our conference, Resetting, I think following taking up on the words from Mariya, I think we are resetting, but we are also realigning, reprioritizing, and above all, rehumanizing school. And one big lesson we learned during the pandemic is that there is no good machine replacing a face-to-face learning experience. So we want the digital in the classroom with the students and the teachers together, and not instead of the classroom. And so in short, I give you this panoramic view on some of the actions, but also always with this mindset that this is about happiness indeed.
Very much, Mr. Costa. Now we go to the Czech Republic. Mr. Fryč, the Czechs were always role models for Slovenians. It's actually the Czechs who taught Slovenians to play football many years ago, more than 100 years ago. But of course, also in other fields. But of course, we see that the Czech Republic is prospering in many ways. Again, so what would be your, let's say, contribution to our common European experience when it comes to good practices presently, and also for the future when it comes to education, especially education embraced by digitalization?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, Ministers, dear guests. First, many thanks to Minister Kustec for inviting the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of the Czech Republic to participate in this conference. We appreciate it very much, not only excellent experience on football plays, but sports ground, but thanks to very fruitful cooperation with Slovenia in the field of education we having for many, many years. So many thanks once again for inviting me. I try to be brief and I try to be very concrete and to mention 3 examples very closely linked to the main topic of this part of the conference. The Czech Republic realizes that digital transition is one of the turning points as it presents both opportunities and challenges. We actively participate in finding the way forward at European level through activities set out as Digital Education Action Plan as well at national level. Let me mention some good examples we are having in our minds and we are going to realize in coming years, and also some of examples which are already running and we think that they are very important for further development of education in the Czech Republic. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Recovery Plan includes a number of measures which are related to digital education. And by the end of 2022, electronic libraries of digital educational resources for primary and secondary schools will be created in order to support the innovation of educational content. We reflect a lot of outcomes which were provided in the previous period and which were also supported by European sources and by sources at national level. So we'd like to bring it closer to schools and give the opportunity to use those outcomes in every primary and secondary schools. This initiative will be based on ongoing examples of good practice, like as an open catalog of education resources, platform for digital education, and all of these documents will be interactive to be useful for classes, for lessons in every school in the Czech Republic. The second very important point or topic, if I can mention, is the IT administration in schools. I don't know the situation in your countries, but speaking about digitalization education, you have to have enough experts able to make this vision possible in every school. So we decided as a ministry about 1,000 new vacancies in this field, especially for schools. And the aim of this measure is to assure that IT support in schools is provided by qualified IT professionals, like a precondition for better development in this field in primary and secondary schools. The ministry has also been cooperating with the National Office for Cyber and Information Security in the field of digital education. And the question of cyber security, we are going to bring closer to teachers and headmasters to be much more developed and to have better information how to deal with cyber security in schools. So we are providing schools by e-learning course Safe in Cyber, which was created. And for the time being, about 2,000 teachers have already participated in this course. Last example I'd like to mention is nothing new. Going back to that, what Commissioner Gabriel said and Minister Costa also mentioned is a question of digital well-being. I think it's a topic for every European country, thanks to experience we have from the previous 24 months, 20 months when the COVID pandemic is running through Europe. And this is also one of the priorities which was identified by the Ministry of Education, speaking about main priorities for the Czech presidency in the Council of the EU, which will take place in the second half of 2022. We consider that it is important not only to focus on equipping all European citizens with adequate digital skills and competencies, but also on the topics related to safe digital environments, media literacy, and mental health, which is very important. We also have a lot of data concerning the life well-being of school and pupils during the pandemic situation in the Czech Republic. We use those evidence for future development in this field and try to prepare adequate programs and activities for schools as such to further develop better well-being for future education. So thank you very much, and thank you very much once again for a kind invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fryč. We'll have another round, but now we go to France, to Mr. Geffray. Well, I was talking about football. Slovenia-France was actually the first ever national football team match for Slovenia, which actually didn't exist in that time. That was exactly 100 years ago. But I don't want to talk or introduce you by football, Mr. Geffray. It's the French who have really a special place in Slovenian history, because during the brief occupation by Napoleon in the early 1900s, it was the French who actually introduced as first the Slovenian language into schools. Well, history is sometimes cruel, because 5 years later the French were kicked out by Slovenians from present Slovenia because they were too strict while imposing taxes. But we know that French are very strict, and that's why I was really asked to ask you the question, because we know that France has a really special and strict philosophy behind the attitude towards using smartphones in schools, so allowed, not allowed, during classes or during breaks. So could you enlighten us a little bit on this philosophy? How does it work in France, and what approach you take, because it's really a very actual question for everybody.
Okay, thank you for these discussions, which are very interesting. Perhaps if you agree, I would like to underline 4 examples, very concrete, and which one of them being the question of using smartphone or not at school. The first point, because it's a global general philosophy, the first point is that with regard to exceptional situations and the pandemic, the health crisis has showed that digital will never take the place of the teacher. I think, of course, it's an evidence, but I think it's necessary to underline this point. But it will not take its place, but it will of course improve practices and makes it possible to respond to exceptional situations. Because on the other hand, nobody in France could accept that there would be no school in case of another disaster, for example, a natural disaster or something like that. Everybody considers in France that school will always take place, even if it's at distance. And that's why, to give you very concrete examples of what we make, the ministry has built a stock of digital equipment, which means 10,000 computers, connection kits, and cameras, etc., which can be sent everywhere in France in less than 1 day, in less than 24 hours, in case of disaster. Which means that it belongs now to our global conception of school. And moreover, beyond this exceptional circumstances, the fact is that the digital devices or digital practices are being used more and more, both by teachers and by pupils, in normal situations. To give you an example, we have a very strong measure, which is called homework done, which means that to make their homework, our students can be helped by, for example, teachers, but usually it was directly at school. And some people, for this reason, could not stay at school to benefit from this system, and so have to do their homework at home. But thanks to digital technology, we are allowing pupils to join their teachers while they are at home in order to be helped for their homework. And so we reduce social inequalities by helping them directly at home through video conference, allowing them to join their teacher. The third point is that you in the case of in the frame of this conference, you underline the question of well-being in education. And one of the dimensions of well-being in education is, of course, the inclusive school. And to give you another very concrete example, we have developed, we have made a robotic telepresence system available to schools for pupils or students who are prevented from attending school by serious and long-term illnesses. Very concretely, it allows the students or these pupils to continue to have access to their class and to their friends and to their schools and to their teachers, to their staff, through a robot, a little robot, which is in the classroom. And so the equipment consists in a robot in the school, and while they have a computer at home or a tablet at home for the pupil, and they are directly in their classroom, in their normal environment, and it's very it's a very good experience because it shows that it participates to the well-being of these students who are, of course, who have serious and long-term illnesses. Last but not least, the question of the use of mobile phones, because you asked this question. The fact is that in France, the use of mobile phones or any other electronic communication terminal device, like for example tablets, is prohibited at school and in school and in lower secondary schools, which means before you are 15 years old, to give you an idea of what it means concretely. Because we consider that their use is detrimental to the quality of listening and concentration required by activities. And of course, because of sometimes mobile phones can be a vector of cyberbullying and facilitate access to violent image, for example. So that's why this control measures applies in all activities related to education, but even in other spaces of the school. For example, during the education, the sports, or during the cultural outings, etc. But you must know that the educational use of mobile phones can be expressly authorized by the internal regulations and must be supervised by a member of the school community, which means when it is for learning through under the control of a teacher, it is possible, but in the rest of your life of student or pupil, this is prohibited for all the reasons that I gave you. So I don't know if it's good practices, but it is an example of what we make. And the fact is that the results of this measure about cyberbullying, about concentration, about the quality of relationships between our students or pupils or with their teachers are very, very encouraging. And that's why it's in the law in France, and that's why it will be probably it will stay like that for the years to come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Geffray. I know we now go to Ms. Haugg in Germany. Well, the recent development of Germany is really admired throughout Europe, and not only in Europe, and especially your response on the federal level during the pandemic to support schools financially with regards to human resources to reduce the learning deficits incurred during the epidemic and school closures. And we know that you have, of course, a very sophisticated educational system because of the Länder, so the federal states, and it's sometimes really difficult to have an overview. But actually you succeeded in that. Could you tell us something about this? How this response was actually organized and possible, and what is the success of it?
Yes, thank you. Hello, firstly to everybody, and I would like to take the chance to thank and congratulate the Slovenian presidency for this very interesting conference. And I'm a little bit disappointed that you as a moderator haven't mentioned sports to me. I'm also a fan of soccer. With some success in
there is one reason, Ms. Haugg, is that Slovenia has actually never beaten Germany in football. I wanted to avoid to state this fact, yes. So sorry.
No problem at all. But to be honest now again, you mentioned one of our, I wouldn't say a problem, but challenges, that is the cooperation in Germany between the federal level and the level of the 16 länder. So for us, it's not like in France to have one rule across the whole country. We mainly have always 16 different possibilities how to deal with the problem. But nevertheless, at the moment, we have a strong effort on cooperation between these two levels of the system. And we already started in 2019 with a big program from the federal level to improve the infrastructure of our school. Probably that would surprise you, because Germany is a rich country and we are famous for our technologies and so on. But the infrastructure for modern technologies at school is not at the top in Europe. So we started this program, and we have been very happy that we already started several years ago, because during the pandemic situation, we again saw the lack in the system. That is really a problem. And school nowadays need a quick access to all the networks, and all students need a computer, and the teachers need it, and so on. But infrastructure, of course, is not the only thing. The other point is train the teacher. The biggest part of our teachers got their education without this kind of so-called new technologies. A teacher of math is a teacher of math, and he never thought about how to use modern technology in his classroom. And so this is the second strong effort in Germany at the moment, where we like to improve the system. I think we are running out of time, so I'm quick and short. And I like to stress what some of the ministers already mentioned. Beside all these effort in technology and supporting students, learning is still a process, and in the center of this process is the communication between human beings. And this is necessary for learning process, and this is necessary for well-being, for social behavior and so on. So this is in our system, especially during and after the epidemic, a strong effort in the system. And we are not only involving the official system, we have strong links to volunteers, to foundations who work in the field of education. And we like to strengthen this kind of cooperation between the official part of the states and all the other initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haugg. We will do a quick round with one question to all participants, but I would like to, of course, include Mr. Jenko, the future classroom teacher, with so many knowledge to our discussion. How do you see your future based on all experience we also shared within this this panel? So was that an inspiration for you? And then how do you see your future in the classroom, if there will be a classroom?
Yeah, it works. So hello. I would firstly like to greet all the distinguished guests of this panel, all the participants at the conference, of course, moderator, Mr. Bergant, and I would like to thank the organizers, so the Ministry, CMEPIUS, the Directorate General for Youth Education, Sports and Culture, for inviting us here. We find it extremely important that you want to hear our voice. the voice of young people that are actively participating in this process now. Well, regarding to your question, as of March 2020, a lot of things changed for the students. The impact of these changes for many students go even beyond our study environment. As the study moved online and the students left the lecture rooms, the faculties, the universities, a lot of things changed. First, the most obvious thing was the increased use of ICT. Due to the increased need for information support, especially due to this implementation of distance learning, the ICT support at the universities, well, I'm talking about the universities in Slovenia, was quite strengthened, both for employees and for students. As the use of different programs for distance educations, Moodles, e-classrooms increased and intensified, the IT support was actually crucial. The support also included the implementation of training for the use and for the use of these tools and individual assistance to higher education teachers and students. On the other hand, I must say that the students themselves were also played quite a big role during the epidemic, as the universities regularly cooperated with us in preparing work strategies and other plans for the time of the epidemic. They took our opinion into account, and I can even say, but again, this is my opinion, that our voice, the voice of students, was heard even more than before the epidemic. In the beginning, we all found ourselves as we knew, but later on, more thought-out plans were made for distance education, and that's why it was easier for us to actually to study in the second wave of the epidemic. I think that we students were not deprived of anything regarding the study process, of course, but I would like to repeat, and I hope that the epidemic situation will allow us to end this study year alive in the faculties, face-to-face, because regarding anything else, it is still important to be there, to have this human-to-human contact. I think we will take out of our studies much more if we will be there personally, not just watching each other through different Zooms, Microsoft Teams, and other programs. I believe that in the end, it will be on the three most important stakeholders of the university environment, so pedagogical and professional workers and students, to what extent the study will take the advantage of ICT and not just use it because it's modern to use it. We must not forget that ICT really saved our studies in the last year and a half. I cannot even imagine what would happen if the epidemic struck like 10, 20, 30 years ago. But we need to think carefully and combine the good qualities of both ways and get the most out of it. For us, for students, and of course for all the other parties of this educational environment. This is why it is extremely important that we enter a new era with a new mentality. Our desires for knowledge, research, academic and extracurricular socializing must find new paths, new ways, new challenges. I think that this is actually, as I see it as a student, the charm of this academic environment. It knows no boundaries, it is constantly learning, upgrading. It also manages to draw something good from these dark periods, and it uses it for its own development. It does not see obstacles in changes, but new opportunities. So let's learn, let's explore, let's discover new ways and use it smartly.
Great. I will start the last round, which will be a little bit quicker than the first one, with you. As I said, you will probably, do you see your career in the classroom still?
Yeah, of course. A teacher must be a person that stays in the classroom. A teacher must be a real person, an empathetic person, a person that feels pupils, that feels students. If it's a teacher on higher education levels, And ICT must never become a supplement to this teacher, only a support.
Did this experience you faced as a student actually influence your vision of how you want to be in the classroom?
Yeah, actually, yes. I think that this situation taught us something, that our knowledge, we must not find only new ways of transporting the knowledge, but we must find new knowledge. We must know as teachers that knowledge is constantly upgrading, and even the pupils usually know that something that we are saying to them is no longer valid. Mm-hmm. So we must constantly learn, constantly use new ways. But again, I say it again, use it wisely.
Great, and I now pose you the first question. It will be the same question for everybody in the panel. So, how do you see the role of future school in a digital environment? Do you see a social equity, a compensatory role of the school?
Yeah, it is really important that school does not compete with the new technologies, mm-hmm. With social networks, with different apps, mobile phone apps. The school must use it, must integrate it into its own system, but with care. All the ICT used in schools must have an added value. And this is really important on any stage. From kindergarten, of course, we are usually forgetting kindergartens. That is also one step in our educational system. Till the, let's say, PhD studies at the universities, yeah.
Education never ends.
Never ends. Long life education.
That's it.
Will help teachers. Will help with teachers having this knowledge. Will also help children and the society.
Great, and Madam Commissioner, let us hear from you. Well, how do you see the future? Do you see schools as let's say places where as I asked Mr. Jenko, where we can balance knowledge and life skills? Does school of the future have this compensatory role?
Well, first of all, I fully agree with Mr. Jenko. And after, what I would like to say is that our best investment, the best investment in our future is to invest in our young people, their well-being, knowledge and skills, both for work and for life. Because competencies such as computational thinking are not only for tech enthusiasts or for those who want to become engineers. On the contrary, in this age of accelerating digital transformation, digital skills are also becoming part of life skills. Computing and informatics at school allow young people to gain a critical and hands-on understanding of the digital world. It also helps them develop complementary skills such as adaptability, communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, extremely important, creativity, entrepreneurship, and readiness to learn. So that's why, for me, what is really important that we already have in our digital education action plan, different series of actions that can help this movement. Of course, on one side, with our member states, we need to foster innovative teaching and learning practices for the development of digital skills, as well as the professional development of teachers' digital competencies. In the next year, second important thing, we would like to update the digital competencies framework and incorporate artificial intelligence and data-related skills in it. The framework will outline what it means to be digitally competent in the 21st century. And third, we have the opportunity not only to prepare our children for the world, but also to prepare them to become active designers and co-creators of the world in which they live. A great example of how digital technologies prepare young people to do that is the Digital Education Hackathon, which is being held in parallel with this conference. That's exactly that. The hackathon enables young people in Europe and beyond to become drivers of innovation, to develop solutions to major societal challenges, and we need to support them. And final point that was already mentioned by other participants, to achieve our objectives in the area of digital education, we need to keep working together. We need to continue to discuss our shared challenges, exchange best practices, listen to our partners in education and training institutions, as well as the private sector, social partners, and civil society. And this conference made a great contribution to this dialogue. I would like to say big thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Now we go to Ms. Haugg. Well, social equity is also let's say, a important element when it comes to the role of schools also in the future. We know that in Germany you're paying a lot of attention to it in a very interesting way. So how do you see the future of schools regarding this part of let's say compensatory role of schools, this addressing social equity, because this is one of the big, let's say, questions of humanity, not only climate change, but also social injustice and the problems, how to achieve, let's say, social equity.
I would describe the School of the Future as a place to meet people with different skills and abilities, supported by and in cooperation with digital instruments, and in a green surrounding where you could put on hands still on real life and get in touch with real life. So this would combine all these different needs and chances and efforts we need in the education system. So very short in one sentence.
Okay, now to France, Mr. Geffray, your thoughts on how actually schools can be supported to address different needs of children in all areas of their development and also address social equity.
Yes, in one sentence too, but we school has two main objectives. The first one is to allow each pupil to become free and enlightened citizen at the digital age, which means that he must both learn, know and understand what the digital area means and how it can influence his own life. And the second dimension is to reduce inequalities through access to knowledge and culture. Mm-hmm. And this must be made at each stage of the student schooling, with the priority given to the lower grades, because we know together that it is from the earliest age that difficulties at school arise. So this is our both eternal and current challenge.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fryč, your thoughts on that?
Thank you very much. First, let me react to the necessity to balance the knowledge and skills-oriented education. I feel the same as it was mentioned by previous speakers. In our strategy for education 2030 in the Czech Republic, the first strategic goal focuses on acquiring the competencies needed for active civic, professional and personal life. And this goal responds to wider social change, such as the increasingly important ability to navigate, work with and apply abundant amount of information. It aims to prevent pupils and students from overloading with information and on the contrary to support the development of their key competencies and literacies in different areas. In this respect, let me mention digital education again, because I think this is something what is going to provide us in coming 10 years, definitely. And on the basis of this strategy defined skills-oriented goals in the sphere of digital education, we are going to improve digital literacy of pupils, improve digital literacy of pedagogues and teachers, and definitely we have to reduce digital inequalities. What was one of the weakest side of the last 20 months we were following in my country. And in this respect, we have to focus all of our energy to have real equal access of all pupils to education as such. Thank you.
Mr. Costa, your take on the issue?
Well, let me put it in simple terms. As I said before, we should not take the goal for the mean and do not mix up what we aim at with the tool. I I was reading a book about books yesterday, The Infinity in a Read by Irene Valero. It's a great book about the history of books. And at some point she says, if some copyist from books from Middle Age would come to one of our apartments, you would find everything strange, the dishwasher, the lights, the tap water. The only thing you'd recognize would be books. So there are things that will stay longer than most of the technology. And for this reason, we have to use the technology to make sure that those things that stay longer are well used. And this means that if we focus on a school that promotes values like democracy, citizenship, curiosity, the ability to solve problems, the ability to cooperate, these are implications for a more equitable world and a world that is aware of human rights. So if we focus on those, then the tools can be used just to help and not to create problems. And I think that's the important message. And we need to develop indicators. We need not to pay attention at school rankings that don't say much about equity and that promote individual competitions that are meaningless. And we need to focus on what really matters, which is human development through education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costa. And last but not least, our minister, Madam Kustec.
Well, for sure, school is the first home of education. And the teachers are the engines, the motors of the educational process in schools. Digital communication, digital tools are only representing an additional support very much adapted to the needs of those existing and future generations to be able to gain knowledge even more effectively, more quicker, more close to their mindset. But the frameworks of education and the aims of education needs to maintain on the traditional pillars. But we need to be aware that especially in these times of very rapid modernization, also the generational needs and expectations of our young people are in a sense of their world. And we as decision makers, as teachers, as professionals, as other representatives of other stakeholders, we need to be aware of this. And if we are going to step together, then we are going to be able to prepare the best possible future definition of knowledge and educational process. But we can do this only if we are going to approach positively, as Mr. Jenko was brilliantly addressing, and sincerely. That means that we do need to identify this exact goal by ourselves according to our different obligations, also different interests. And if we are going to do so, and I'm more than happy again to see, to hear that the findings of yesterday's and today's conference are exactly pointing to this orientation, then we are going to do the best possible vision of the future educational system. And do allow me to conclude with one of concrete follow-up proposals that brightened my mind when I was listening to the findings of yesterday and today. And I do put on the table, on our working table, to my colleague ministers, to our responsible commissioner, and to you all, to start to think about introducing a special hub for education of the future. A hub that is going to combine all of us with our approaches, with our proposals, to prepare something that is going to be the product, the sum of all the best that we do that we can offer, and also our youngers expect from us to do for the education of the future, for individual member states and for something that we need to call and we want to call also the European vision and value of education and European civilization for the future.
Great. We have a very concrete suggestion. And last word goes to you, Mr. Jenko, before we give the floor to Mr. Musek Lešnik for the summary. Well, you know, not everybody has a possibility to sit in a panel with EU commissioners, ministers, decision makers in important countries. Well, now you have the possibility to ask them, what do you as a future classroom teacher and student and educator, what can they do now in this moment for you to be a little bit nearer to the future we're facing? Okay, the future education hub, one thing. What can you do more?
Okay, yeah, that's quite a challenge from you now.
You're a young man with future, so you need challenges.
Okay, so I would just like maybe to ask all of the policymakers and others to be aware that people that are coming from the practice, from the schools, know a lot of things. So let's listen to them, let's cooperate. As Madam Commissioner already said, listening is really important, listening to each other. And as our Minister already said, cooperation. So yes, please listen to the teachers that are in the practice for years now, and those that are not in the practice for years but are coming to practice, because they are gaining knowledge at the faculties. Also the theoretical knowledge, not maybe yet tested in schools, but let's test this knowledge, let's take the most out of it, and yeah, please listen to the practice, and I think everything will be okay. The future generations are in good hands.
Thank you very much. So, Madam Commissioner, did you hear that?
I heard that, and it's absolutely important. I must say that that's what exactly we do and will continue to do. Not only to listen to you, but to shape the future together with you. Because yes, you have the knowledge, you have the experience on the ground, and you have our support. So when we join forces, I'm sure that we'll be able to overcome the challenges and to transform the challenges into opportunities.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the entire panel for accepting I'm back to football now, quite a long edit time of almost 20 minutes. It's not injury time, it's edit time. So thank you for your participation and for your thoughts, and all the best to Brussels, to France, to Germany, to Portugal, and to the Czech Republic. So thank you very much for your cooperation and for your thoughts. And now we give the floor to Mr. Musek Lešnik for the really last summary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. I was trying to wrap up.
Oh, that's interesting. You will get the minister's microphone.
Does it work now?
What does it mean for the future?
It jumps.
I was just joking.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I was trying to find something to wrap up, and all the time I was thinking one of my kids is going to be disappointed, because yesterday I was talking the conference with my wife, who is actually developmental and clinical psychologist, and she was asking me, are you going to discuss how in the future digital tools and artificial intelligence are going to replace teachers? And one of my kids said, well, that would be great, and another said that would be horrible. So at least one of my kids is going to be really disappointed today. But what I think is really important here is, if I go back back again to this picture that I mentioned, that was made 120 years ago. It was made during the times that when kids coming to schools actually met completely new horizons, new worlds in schools. Schools opened gates to information. And the situation right now is completely the opposite. Kids are coming to schools with their smartphones full of information, and the role of the school is changing, of course. And this digital transformation, of course, is here. And as Commissioner Gabriel has said, the pandemic actually only accelerated it, accelerated this process of digital transformation of the school. And what is important from what we heard yesterday and today is actually, yes, there is a challenge of having clear ethical guidelines to use digital tools wise and responsibly for the maximum benefit of students and teachers. And it's clear, obviously, that these tools are useful and should be used by teachers, and of course cannot replace the teachers and the human touch and human contact. So what is really important here is to tackle the challenge of training teachers in ways how to use these tools for the best benefit of the education. So that can bring us towards moving, what I called yesterday, moving from one-size-fits-all education towards individualization, maybe personalization of the school, with one important thing in mind as well. We are approaching the stage where we will need to move from this perspective that cognitive skills and competencies actually are a guarantee for a lifelong success and satisfaction, and replace it with understanding that the guarantee for a long life success and satisfaction is a combination of cognitive skills, but also emotional, social, and all the other skills. And schools will, of course, have ever more important function in instilling and actually developing these skills in young people. So what I think is really important here is that we use such gatherings as we had this for yesterday and today, and panels and discussions to exchange experience, discuss the challenges, and find actually the best ways how to incorporate all the digital tools and opportunities that they offer, and on the other hand to actually support and also empower teachers to use them for the benefit of all. I sometimes conclude my remarks with the notion that, of course, not each student, each child who is today in kindergarten or school is going to be a leader of the future, but all the future leaders, all the leaders of the Europe in the following decades are in the schools right now. And I think working with them, enabling them with the best learning opportunities is something that we are here to discuss, and really to use these opportunities like this for the benefit of the education. So I really enjoyed listening to everybody, and I think that this idea of the hub is something that we should discuss.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musek Lešnik. Thank you also, Madam Minister and Mr. Jenko, for taking part in the panel discussion.